This is Tyrese Halliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
Look, setting the pace with Alex and Facci. Alex and Facci, Alex and Allison. If I put our jacks in the paint, how you gonna stop me? How you gonna stop me? We can go head to head. Call out your top three, call out your top three. Look at the switch from Duarte. Now that boy got three. We got Halliburton running point. This is the Benedict for the shot. If anybody gon' come in the post, then we got Jalen Smith for the block. Setting the pace, going to the top. Setting the pace, going to the top. This is your number one podcast. Sweeping every team, we gon' need a mop. Smooth.
What is going on, Pacer Nation? Welcome back to another episode here of Setting the Pace. I'm your host, Alex Golden, and joining me is the man ready to answer some questions, Michael J. Facci. Facci, what do we got going on today?
Oh, it's a good old-fashioned mailbag episode. Alex, I'm not going to make the same mistake that I've made many times to say that we're delivering mail today, because that is not the case. We will be reading the mail. I don't know if that's worse because it's illegal reading someone else's mail, but here we are today. So,
absolutely. Well, before we get started, let me ask you this, Facci, because I got a question for you. Do you have this problem with having 2 jars of peanut butter in your house? Because I don't understand what the big deal is with your wife accidentally buying some crunchy peanut butter that you won't let her go get some creamy. I mean, come on, man. She's pregnant. What are we doing here?
It's not okay. It's not that I'm not letting her. She can do whatever. We made a grocery list together. She bought the wrong peanut butter, and then she tried it, and then I'm hearing it's my fault. And I'm just like, wait, what? So she goes, oh, crunchy peanut butter. Should I throw it out? And it's like, well, why don't you try it first?
It's actually, I like crunchy peanut butter.
We had some earlier. It was fine. It might not be anyone's go-to, but it's not like it's like stale or hideous or anything. But I'm sure we're just gonna have to buy some new peanut butter.
I mean, just finish out the crunchy yourself and let her get some creamy. I mean, she had to post about it on her Instagram story, so that's why I was like, man, this seems like a big deal. Was this a fight at the house or no?
No, not at all. I mean, we have one friend who's like oddly obsessed with crunchy peanut butter, so I think she was like, you know what? Let me see what the people want. What do they have to say about peanut butter? And yet here we are. I feel like I'm about to be buying some peanut butter in my near future.
All right, Facci. Well, now that we got that out of the way, I just want to clear that up. Let's start things off with the mailbag.
All right. So question number 1, Aaron M., a loyal, longtime faithful listener.
Yeah.
Aaron, we appreciate you. He said, is this offseason the most crucial one in the last 5 to 10 years for the Pacers?
Man, I do think it's important, but calling it the most important is, to me, kind of a little bit over dramatic, Facci. They have a great opportunity here to add key pieces before Halliburton gets his max contract the next offseason, but with how the league is, things change so quickly. So I'm not going to say it's the most important, but I do think it's important. I just feel like it's kind of hard to say the most important. I think probably one of the most important for off seasons was when Paul George requested that trade and how everything went. So I don't think it's at that level, but I do think it's big.
So I actually have this offseason just behind then, because that Paul George trade shifted the Pacers a totally different direction. And then when they got Oladipo and Sabonis, that was huge. It felt like the next start. But I do think this is a really big offseason. I thought last offseason was supposed to be a really big one too, but the Pacers unfortunately whiffed on DeAndre Ayton becoming a Pacer. When they traded Brogdon, it was for Nesmith, the future pick, cap space. Drafting Mathurin and Nembhard was very big. So last year was big. I think this offseason is going to be even bigger, but I do think that 2017 offseason was like a total franchise-changing offseason. But now let's factor in why this offseason could be so big. You could have 4 picks in the top 32. You got cap space. Anything could happen. But, Alex, I took a trip down memory lane, and I looked at the Pacers' recent offseasons, and whoa. And there ain't a lot to be proud about. Let's look in 2020. This was the offseason for the Pacers. They traded TJ Leaf and a second-round pick for Jalen McHugh. They signed Keelan Martin, and they drafted Cassius Stanley. That was it.
Yeah, pretty bad.
So when you talk about how big this offseason is, when it's stacked up against some of the offseasons of the past, yeah, I do expect this to be a very big offseason for the Pacers, but not the biggest.
Yeah, it's not the most crucial one. And that's kind of where I looked at it in terms of the word crucial. I don't think it's like make or break. You got to get things right this year or things can really go to haywire. No, I think people always act like every offseason is the biggest offseason for their team just because you're excited. You want to see moves. But I think you put a graphic out not too long ago talking about the free agents in this class. There's not a lot there. What players are there going to be available in trade? I mean, we saw last year, seemed like there was going to be a very busy offseason, and then Kevin Durant just dried up the entire market with his trade requests. So, who knows if there's a player out there that does something similar to that this offseason? You just never know, Foch. So that's why I think the league is just ever changing. The salary cap is going to go up. I still think that there's opportunities moving forward where there could be more of a crucial one. Once Tyrese hits his prime and he's, in the middle of that extension, that's when I get a little bit worried because you want to make sure that you do enough to keep him happy here. But let's move on to our next question. This one comes from Randall Wood. He said, what is one of the main things that you are looking forward to seeing with this team for the rest of the season?
Purely developing the young talent. I don't care if we don't win another game, but I want to know who is sticking around in this rotation moving forward. If I had, if I was going to break it down a little bit further, it's Benedict Mathurin starting or playing more with the starting five. I want Jalen Smith back. I want to see more Chris Duarte and Isaiah Jackson. Maybe that's just me being greedy, but the number one thing, you got to develop the young players.
Yeah, I said I'm looking forward to seeing a youth movement in terms of the rotation. I want to see more Kendall, more Nawara, more Jalen, more Ijax, and more Nimhard as the lead ball handler with the second unit. I mean, everything you said, I'm just echoing and maybe adding a few more things to it. It's just we both are in agreement. We know what McConnell is. We know what Miles Turner is. We know what Buddy Hield is. We know what Daniel Tice is. James Johnson. We George Hill. We don't need to see those guys. It's awesome that they're on the team. Let them get some rest. They're getting paid. They don't get paid per game. So it's like, maybe there are some bonus incentives where if a guy's play so many games, I totally get that. I think Drew Holiday did that. I think it was last year. He played the first tip of the game and then fouled immediately to come out. But it was because he got a bonus if he played all a number of games, and that was that certain number to get him there. So I get all that, but I mean, we just want to see consistent minutes for some of these young guys to prove what they got.
Yep. The next question, we got Zachary Barnett. He said, who is your favorite personality on the team? Personally, I love James Johnson. That's what he said.
Yeah, I mean, James Johnson's a cool guy. I don't think there's anything wrong going with that. I just said I got to go Buddy here. He's a pretty funny guy. Seems like a great hang. Tyrese would be the easy answer here, I think, for a lot of people because he's so relaxed, so cool. He's dope as all get out. But, Buddy isn't Tyrese's best friend for no reason. So I just think, Buddy Hield's always cracking jokes, laughing, but he's a little bit quiet when he's on camera. But I think off camera, Buddy might be a fun hang.
I agree with you. I did take the cop-out answer. I went Tyrese Halliburton. I think I'm a little bit biased because when he came on the show, we were really talking about wrestling and everything. I was true. This is just my guy. This is my franchise right here. But if I had to pick one more, I'm going Buddy Hield. And just a fun fact for everybody, we had Andrew Nimhard on, and I got to speak with him offline. I was like, Andrew, who would be an underrated good interview? First name out of his mouth, Buddy Hield. He's like, Buddy's hilarious. Yeah. So I feel like Buddy would just be someone that you could generally enjoy hanging out with, crack a bunch of jokes. And I got to say, it's got to be Buddy and Tyrese as your top two. But at the same point, hey, if you like a James Johnson, I'm more than fine with that.
I bet James Johnson has a lot of great stories from his NBA career. So that wouldn't be a bad one. I think George Hill would be kind of cool too as well. Just kind of pick his brain on everything that happened in the old days with the Pacers and how things were about. Just kind of see what he had to say, but that's where I'm at with that. But let's move on. Next question from Pacer Faithful, Chuck and Jamie. What are your predictions for what happens with all the bigs this offseason? Who stays and who goes?
First of all, shout out to James Johnson. It's his birthday when we're recording this.
Nice.
I'll start with him.
2/20/23.
I'll start with him and just basically say, look, this could be the last year for James Johnson. I believe this is year 14. He's 36 years old. He didn't really play that much this year, so I don't know if James Johnson comes back or is in the league next year. We'll see. Next, Daniel Tice essentially will be an expiring contract next year. I think the Pacers make a solid effort to move Tice. Maybe it's in the offseason, maybe it's midway, but I don't think he finishes next year as a Pacer. But you know what? I said that for this year. Then at next, Jalen Smith, Isaiah Jackson. I want to see him duke it out for that remaining backup five spot, and I hope that one of them takes the job. I think the window of Jalen Smith being our starting 4 has probably been shut. Maybe there's a little bit of a draft in there if it's a little bit creeped open at the bottom, but I don't think Jalen Smith's going to be the starting 4, but I do want to see him get another shot.
Yeah, I didn't even really consider James Johnson with this because I think of bigs, I think of more centers, which is Miles, Tice, Jalen, and Isaiah. But good point. I think you can kind of tie my point in here with Tice for James Johnson, just roster space, because I feel like there's gonna be a lot of opportunities here for the Pacers to add some draft picks, and they don't have any really free agents, I think, outside of O'Shea Brissett this year and George Hill. So if they bring O'Shea back and they want to bring George Hill back, then they don't have any room. So that to me is like, you got rid of Goga, you got rid of Terry Taylor and the waiving of this things. And Jordan Nwora is an expiring contract as well. He's a big. James Johnson is an expiring this year as well. So, I just think with Tice, like you said, he'll be an expiring in 2024. And I think that makes his contract a little bit more appealing to move off of. But I think they're just specifically going to look to get rid of him because of his roster keeping, just taking up a roster spot. And then I said, I think they could find a home for Jalen Smith. I don't necessarily think it's a long-term plan here with Jalen after everything that's happened. Kind of came back on like a short-term deal, very low in money. But I think the one thing is, who do the Pacers draft? Because if the Pacers draft players at his position, when is he going to get playing time? And I think Carlisle can talk to him. Pritchard, Buchanan, all the front office can talk to Jalen and say, hey, look, we appreciate you coming back. And unfortunately, things didn't work out here. Where can we trade you to? Where do you want to go? Kind of like they did with Brogdon, find a home for him and try to make a fair trade and see if that team has interest. But other than that, I think Ijax is here to stay. I think Miles is here to stay.
I agree with that. And hey, Jalen Smith, I still hope it works out, but I fear for the worst. But we'll see that remaining 22 games. Next question, Samuel Culbertson. Who in this draft class that we could draft realistically do you guys like? It could be multiple prospects.
Okay, so I want to put this out here first. I'm not going to dive into why for these players because we have a ton of draft coverage coming up pretty much from March until the draft happens in June. So you're going to be hearing a lot of my opinions on the draft. I've been working on my big board, Facci, trying to get it all figured out, and I'm only about 20 to 25 players deep right now, sorting out my players, and I've moved some guys here and there. But I will say this, in our draft range, we're currently 6th worst record in the NBA. So I will say, keep your eyes on Jarris Walker from Houston.
That was my guy. Yep.
And Cam Whitmore from Villanova. Those are my 2 guys right there, Foch.
Both power forwards. Look, Brandon Miller, I don't think he's going to be there for the Pacers, especially not at 6. We would have to we'd have to get into the top 4. I think he's going to go at 3 or 4. Jarris Walker, that's who I have my eyes on. I think most mocks, they have him at 4 to 6. This is a freshman power forward out of Houston, averaging 11 points, 6.5 rebounds, shooting 50% from the field, 38% from 3. Everything I read on him feels like, hey, this would be a really good pick for the Pacers. We're both clearly in that same headspace of I would love to draft a power forward if possible. This draft has a lot of good guards in it. We already know we've been down that road.
There's a lot of good wings though too, Facci, in this draft, and there's some guards I think could play wing position as well because there's some taller guards in this draft. I will say this about Walker real quick. I know the numbers don't sound great, like you read off, just like saying that.
6 isn't great.
Look at the last 14, 15 games, much better numbers, higher 3-point percentage, higher points per game. I think he was averaging around 17 points over the last 15 games in the 40% range for 3-point shooting. So he's improving. He's a freshman. My only concern, he's got a very similar body build. And I said I wasn't going to get deep into it, but here I am. To Zion, Julius Randle, those kind of bigger builds. So, I was talking with some people off air about this on a text message, and it's just I like the potential of him, but can he guard 1 through 3 in space, or is he going to be only able to guard 4s and 5s? And I don't know yet. That's where I got to dive deeper into. That's why I don't want to get too deep into it, but that's my only concerns, but I really like the way he's projecting as a prospect.
Hey, part of the big reason why Houston just jumped to number 1 in the rankings in college. So, you got to love that. But, yeah, the rest, there'll be a lot more draft coverage coming out. The problem is right now the Pacers are either picking in the very beginning, maybe 6th overall, or then they're not picking again until 26 to 32, right in that range. So there's a lot of good talent in the middle that it's hard to just imagine the Pacers making that trade yet. But if the Pacers were to move up into, like, say, right around 14, 15, our answers could be totally different.
Are we giving picks like for a later pick too?
I just went with initially. I just started out with 6th overall. It was too hard to start looking. I think we have a couple other questions in the mailbag that I did throw out some later projections on. But for this, I just went with, like, who would be one of my top asks if we could pick a guy in that 4 to 6 range.
Okay, I'll just throw a name out there if you're wanting a later pick potentially. Taylor Hendricks.
Okay, I'll keep
Taylor Hendricks, UCF. If you're interested, look him up. There's been some conversations about him with Sam Vecini and his podcast, the Ringers Draft podcast with Kyle Mann and Kevin O'Connor. They did a deep dive on him a little bit. I'm just telling you, as someone that's kind of under the radar, maybe in that 15 to 25 range, he's a name to keep an eye on. I won't say anything else. Let's move on, Facci. Number 6, Tyler Christian said, do Carlisle's increasingly questionable rotations worry you that he might not be the right guy to be the head coach of the ongoing rebuild? Lloyd Pierce may be his lead assistant, but he's done a very admirable job for the games where he's been the intern.
No, look, there's definitely been some questionable rotations, no doubt about it, but it's aided to losing, which is aiding to getting us a better draft pick. And if Carlisle didn't make some of the questionable decisions that he did last year, then we don't end up with Benedict Mathurin 6th overall. And right now, I mean, there's times that I think we all know the best players might not necessarily be out there at all times, but I think there's a bigger picture, and there's no way to ever be like, well, what do you mean I'm tanking? I mean, you can't just flat out say that. So it's just like, you know, he's making some interesting decisions, but I think come draft night, it could very well pay off. And when you give Carlisle a team that could be more ready to win than this one, I think then he'll show this is why he's a Hall of Fame worthy NBA champion head coach.
Yeah, I mean, Rick has done more good than bad. Let's be honest. You know, some of the bad is overblown for sure, but I agree that Rick is stubborn when it comes to playing veterans over rookies. So that is a big concern, and I understand that point of view. But, you know, he's been a great addition to the Pacers. I like him here. I trust him specifically in the playoffs. I think that if you look at any assistant on this team, compare their resume to Carlisle's, it's, you know, it doesn't even stand a chance. So I think, you know, Carlisle is best in a series like that. So I'm not writing Carlisle up. I don't think the guys are tuning him out. And to be honest with you, it feels like every single player on the team that's talked about him openly has had good things to say. Now, there's been stuff I've heard off air, maybe with some things that, you know, some guys were a little frustrated with their rotations, but that's going to be normal with any guy that's not getting minutes. So I'll just say this. Lloyd Pierce has done a good job and Rick's not been here, but I didn't love his tenure in Atlanta, Facci. I didn't love the hire. There's a reason he got fired immediately. He had Nate McMillan come in to be his assistant, and Nate just outcoached him. And I think Nate's been a better coach for Atlanta despite everything that's happened down there. I just think Lloyd Pierce, for me, Foch, maybe you learn from your experience, and maybe you will be a good head coach one day. I mean, 4 or 5 years from now, maybe he's the head coach of the Pacers. Who knows? But I'm not buying into Lloyd Pierce totally.
No, one of the better assistant coaches. Definitely a better assistant coach from where we were in the Nate Bjorkgren era, where, I mean, you barely even had
Greg Foster.
Yeah. So, look, I think that there's a bigger picture. Rick's playing chess. We just got to wait until we get the right pieces before we're ready to, you know, go out there and win for real and make a run at the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure.
Next question we have Chase, simply known as Chase. Just said, do you think the Pacers would take Scoot Henderson if we end up with the 2nd overall pick, even though we already have Halliburton as our main guy? Or do you think we trade down for Brandon Miller, Amen, Azar, etc.?
Yeah, that's a Sore Thompson is his name. I know it's gonna be one you get familiar with, people.
Oh yeah,
a man and a Sore Thompson. So, you know, I've said it wrong before too, but I've been listening to a lot of draft stuff, just like probably a lot of you guys have. But you know, this is a great question here, though, Facci. I think the front office would tell us that you always take the most talented player in the draft and figure it out. You know, Scoot would be the number 1 pick in a lot of previous drafts and future drafts, but based on his projections and talent, you know, just unfortunately is in the same draft class as Victor Wembanyama, one of the most incredible prospects we've seen in NBA history. So, you know, it would be a small lineup with Benedict, Scoot, and Tyrese, but we've seen Carlisle find success with 4-guard lineups. So, I think that it does make sense to just take him and figure it out. But if he could trade with the third team in the draft and get a future pick by just moving back one spot, though, I think Indiana does it, especially if they get Brandon Miller. I honestly think Brandon Miller right now is better than Amin Thompson just for what Rick Carlisle likes to do. Now, they need to get better on defense, and Amin Thompson is a terrific defender, but he's a point guard himself, Foch. So that's one of those things, too. It's like he's a 6'7" point guard, which I think would be interesting to have two ball handlers out there, but he's not a good shooter, and that's Amin Thompson. So, I just think if they could get Brandon Miller and trade back one spot to get a pick next year that's like top 1 protected or something like that, then I think you have to look at that as just like getting another asset, moving back one spot. It feels very similar to me, though, Facci, when Boston traded down with Philly from 1 to 3 to get Jason Tatum at 3, and Philly moved up and got Markelle Fultz. Now, Markelle Fultz did not work out in Philly, but he's done an admirable job in Orlando as their point guard. I think he's just needed to go somewhere where there wasn't as much pressure. But that, to me, is where I'm at. But if you're thinking about trading back to like 5 or 6, I think that's too far of a jump.
Yeah. There was this quick moment where I was like, who are we to turn down Scoot Henderson to say we already have other players? But then I started thinking about it. I love me a good mystery box. But the idea of trading down just one pick to get a guy like Brandon Miller and get a few assets back is very appealing. It reminded me of last year when there was talks the Pacers wanted to trade up from 6 to 4 with Sacramento. And do you remember what Sacramento was offering? For just 2, what they were asking for to slide back 2 picks, it was going to be like 2 first-round picks, a promising young player. Like, all of a sudden, it felt like so much for just 2 picks. If the Pacers had the opportunity to slide back just 1 pick and potentially get maybe another first-round pick, another young player, and get a guy like Brandon Miller at a spot where they need, that's hard to pass up. That really is. So while we shouldn't be getting greedy saying, we don't need Scoot Henderson, getting a player like Brandon Miller is not chump change. He will be good in the NBA.
Yeah, it's a tough one, Foch, because a lot of people love Scoot Henderson. I love Scoot Henderson. I think he's a great player, super athletic freak. That's somebody you wanted to see more of in the Rising Stars games.
I think I'm a little bit down on him because of just that.
Well, you can't do that. You can't do that.
I was like, this is a star, and I know it's not right. We're talking about one All-Star weekend type game. Yes, look, Scoot's going to be a stud. He is, and if the Pacers were to draft him, compared to trading back a pick, I would still be absolutely thrilled because you just make it work with the best talent available. Yeah. But it's good options to have.
I just think sometimes we overthink these things. And if you have Scoot out there, I don't even know how tall he is. I think he's like 6'4", 6'5", maybe.
I think he's actually like 6'3", 6'4".
Is he smaller? Okay. Yeah. Well, Tyrese is 6'5", 6'6".
Yeah.
Mathurin 6'6". So it's not like you're just having a bunch of 6'3" guys out there playing basketball. So you have enough size where you could make it work. So I'm just saying, like, if you feel like Brandon Miller is like close enough to Scoot Henderson in terms of like what you want from your team, then that makes sense to me. But
6'2" for Scoot.
Okay, so he is a lot smaller. I don't know why I was thinking he's bigger. It's probably because of his fro, and it's probably because of how high he gets off the ground. The guy can just be a high flyer. But is he going to want the ball in his hands a lot? That, to me, is the only question. So. And if he is, how does that mesh with Tyrese? It's very far-fetched. We jump up to 2, though, Foch.
It really is. And I was, like, really getting into the weeds of this. And I was like, all right, are we even going to move up? Last year, we moved back in the draft. So, it would be tough. But, it's just Brandon Miller at 6'9", small forward, is such a position of need for the Pacers. So that's very appealing. But it'd be a great spot to be in. I could not complain if the Pacers move up to 2.
And the Pacers could just pull a Sacramento. Honestly, stay where they're at, take the guy they like, and not feel like they have to be forced into taking him. If they want Brandon Miller and they're there at 2 and they want to take him, because I'm not going to jump back to 4 if I don't think the guy that I want's going to be there. And if you think Brandon Miller is the guy, right? I'm just saying you don't jump back to 4 if there's a chance you couldn't get him at 3. So I think if he really is the guy they want, then just take him at 2 and deal with it later. Nobody says you have to follow everything to a T. Everybody last year did not have Paolo going first to the Magic, and then all of a sudden everything flipped on draft night because they knew that the Magic were going to take him over Jabari Smith, and that put Jabari Smith at the 3rd pick when everybody thought he was going 1 or 2. So, I just say don't overthink it. But let's move on. Question number 8 here. I forgot to put the person down who wrote this. So anyway, it says, what is your prediction for the final record of the Pacers, and do they make the play-in? I think this might have been Ricky Kelly.
Very well could have. Ricky's usually good for a question, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
I think it was Ricky. I'm sorry, Ricky. I forgot to write your name down when I.
Ricky, definitely let us know if this was you. But I'm going with 31-51 or 32-50. No play-in for us.
Yeah, so we talked about this on our rest of season preview, which will be releasing on this Monday as we're recording. So you'll be hearing that before you hear this. Personally, me and Facci, we went to the records. I think we had 5 to 6 wins each, which seems a little bit low. I said probably going to be closer to 8-14. Probably is their final record of their last 22 games. I think they have 8-14. Kind of feels right. Maybe they go 7-15, something like that. Maybe they get a win here or there that we didn't give them. But it's one of those things where I think the Pacers are looking bigger picture here, and you don't be surprised if they try to lose on purpose. So I don't think play-in is going to be in play. But at the same point, like you said earlier, I think you said on that show, Chicago, their pick is top 4 protected, not top 8. It's top 4 protected for this year.
Wow, I thought it was top 8. That must have been last year.
That was the year when they actually gave the
trade. Okay.
Yeah, so it's actually top 4 protected.
Ooh.
So I don't think they're going to be able to lose enough games to get there. So they're probably going to try to continue to win with their veterans, Zach LaVine, DeMar DeRozan, Vucevic. They're not going to be ones to tank. So I think that keep an eye on them. But let's move on to the next question.
All right, next question. Jeff Dunham said, does the NBA All-Star game force at least one player from every team on the roster like the MLB one does?
Yeah, so no, they don't do that, but they do try to get everybody involved in some way with skills challenge, with 3-point contest, with the slam dunk contest, with the rookie stuff. Refresh my memory if I'm wrong, but I think there's only 4 teams that weren't represented at this All-Star weekend, and that was the Charlotte Hornets didn't have anybody there. Facci's Washington Wizards. Kevin Durant's Phoenix Suns didn't have anybody there, unless I'm forgetting somebody, but Durant wasn't there. He was on one of the rosters, but he didn't go to he wasn't there, I don't think, playing in the game, obviously. No Devin Booker, no Chris Paul, no DeAndre Ayton. And then Brooklyn. Brooklyn didn't have anybody because they traded all their guys that were going to be there. So those were the only 4 that I could think of off the top of my head that weren't represented this weekend at NBA All-Star Weekend. But 26 teams out of 30 is still a pretty good amount to kind of showcase the league and let some guys get some love there.
Yeah, I mean, you covered it all accurate. The Magic, the Rockets, the Spurs, they squeezed in for like the skills challenge. Oh, the Spurs. Did you mention the Spurs? Yeah.
No, that Jeremy Sohan was out there.
You're right. Yeah. So they
the Wizards would have been out there if they didn't have stupid Corey Kispert and Johnny Davis.
Johnny Davis. Oh my! People forget Johnny Davis is even playing basketball anymore.
Think about this: the Wizards could have had Malcolm Brogdon as their starting point guard, or draft Johnny Davis, and they picked Johnny Davis. Talk about it.
He's averaging 1 point. 1 point on the year.
When
I was at the game, Johnny Davis came in. All right. So the Pacers are down 22 points. Johnny Davis comes in, and I'm like, oh, look at that. Like throwing the Rook a bone. He steps out of bounds the second he touched the ball, and he didn't touch it again. And I was like, oh, my God.
Oh, man.
It was a hard fall for Johnny Davis. But, hey, I'm ready to move on. What do you got?
Last one here, Facci, number 10. This one comes from Rooster, our good friend that you owe a jersey to. I owe a jersey to. We owe a jersey. Yeah. I got a little ahead of myself, but he said if you could pick one player in the NBA to add to this roster as a starting power forward to add to a starting lineup of Tyrese Halliburton, Benedict Mathurin, Buddy Hield, and Miles Turner, who would it be?
Giannis. All right, right over there. I mean, you can't go wrong.
Let's be realistic, though.
Well, he said pick one player.
I know. I mean, I would have picked Giannis, too. That's like saying the best player in the NBA. Do you have an answer for realistic or no?
I just went with Giannis. I didn't know we had to be that. What do you got?
Okay, so I said this is a tough question. I said the Pacers could get this player. If the Pacers could get this player, I'd probably look at Pascal Siakam. Okay.
Oh, man. Be awesome.
The OGs, the John Collins, the Obi Toppin names, they're below a tier than Siakam is. Siakam's a special player, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
And one player that could be intriguing, but I think Rick would pull his hair out if they try to trade for Cat. Okay. Karl Anthony Towns could be a guy on the move.
Rick's got to have hair in order to pull hair.
Well, whatever hair he has, that's the whole joke.
Okay, all right,
whatever hair Rick has left, he would be pulling it out if the Pacers traded for Karl Anthony Towns. Now, Karl Anthony Towns, there's a lot of speculation that he might go to the Knicks because of his connection with New York. Now, hear me out, Facci.
I'll hear you.
If this team implodes in the offseason, bring this man home, reunite him with the G2 zone, Paul freaking George.
Oh, I mean, it'd be magical. It really would at this point. Paul George is what this team is missing.
I'm just saying at this point, I understand that everybody hates Paul George. Tyrese Halliburton has asked the fans to stop booing. If Paul George reunited, came back to Indiana, I think that would be a miraculous story. Now, I don't think he wants to leave California for here. I'm just saying, but Tyrese Halliburton is a special point guard. If he feels like the window has shut with him and Kawhi and that group out in LA, then I would be aggressive on that. Now, that's my pipe dream. That's my Giannis answer, I guess you could say. But I think based on what Toronto does, I mean, I think that Pascal could be somebody that could be available.
Can't say that he can't be, depending on the direction of where Toronto goes. I mean, they're in a really weird spot. I mean, not many expected them to trade assets for Jakob Poeltl when he's going to be a free agent, but they did it. And they didn't sell any of the guys that are hitting free agency. So we'll see. But it's a fun question to ask. You told me Giannis wasn't believable, which obviously he isn't, but then you named a couple of guys that are going to be
I said if things implode
hard to acquire.
But Paul George is not the face of the franchise. Karl Anthony Towns is no longer the face of the franchise for the Timberwolves. It's Anthony Edwards.
Yeah.
I think you would say Kawhi Leonard is the face of the franchise for the Clippers, right?
You should.
Right? I mean, maybe Paul's the face. I mean, they're kind of faces together,
Yeah,
but
they're like 1A, 1B.
But I'm just saying Giannis is like MVP level, the best player in the league.
Exactly. It's not happening. I can definitely tell myself that will never happen. But hey, look, there's very few guys that if you add to this team as a starting power forward would take this team to the true next level. I think when you touched on Siakam, he is one of those that gets us past just being a playoff appearance team. It could actually be winning a series or two.
Right.
So, hey, it's fun, but we're just going to have to wait and see who actually becomes available. And I think this is exactly why you're happy the Pacers have as much assets available as they do going into this offseason.
Give me question one. Let's do it.
All right, question one, Matthew Peck. Hey, we appreciate you. He said, are there any concerns that Mathurin and Halliburton have only played limited minutes together this season? Do you have any concerns that long-term they may not fit together, and should Rick be working on integrating them together more now since this season isn't about winning?
Okay, first thing here I'm going to say is I'm not worried at all about anyone now working with Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese Halliburton can play with any single person in the entire NBA. I'm disappointed with the amount of minutes they have played together so far this season, and I'm hoping that changes in the last quarter of the season. So, we'll see here what Carlisle does, but I think this is a great opportunity to see what you have the last couple of games, the last 22 games, see what Carlisle can figure out. What plays work, what plays don't. Does he fit next to Buddy Hield? Can you make a Buddy, Tyrese, Benedict Mathurin backcourt work? Is that something that's in the future? I mean, that to me is where I'm at, but with them working together, I don't think that's a problem at all. I just think at some point, I think the bigger problem is Buddy and Benedict, not Tyrese and Benedict.
That right there is a fantastic point, because look, I don't have any concerns about Tyrese Halliburton and anyone. Like you mentioned, look, Tyrese could get a bucket out of my grandmother. I really do think he's that talented of a point guard. But the thing is, I mean, you mentioned about maybe 2 episodes ago, they've only logged like 700 minutes together between Halliburton and Mathurin. That is not enough. We clearly envision them playing together a lot more. But the key thing that you said is Buddy and Mathurin together. That's really where it's a little bit tough. Those are 2 scorers. Those are 2 guys that are always going to be looking to score first. And obviously, they both play the same position. Sure, you could play them at the 2 and the 3, or you could slide Buddy down, whatever you want to do. But it feels like in order to fully unleash Mathurin to his full potential, either Buddy's got to be coming off the bench, or maybe he's on a different team. And we've known that for a while, but we still want to see it work to see if it can work.
I'd like to see them switch roles a little bit, just see how it looks. I understand Tyrese and Buddy have a lot of chemistry together, and that's part of the problem with making that change. But I don't think you can worry about that, because while Buddy is a really good shooter and a really special player in this league, I mean, he's special to an extent. he doesn't have the ceiling that Mathurin has. And that's where you have to put your two highest ceiling players together, Halliburton and Mathurin, and see what you got, because at this point, it's what are we doing? That's kind of where I'm at. And it's not a knock on what Mathurin's done this year, how Carlisle's utilized him. It's been fine. He's been a good six man. He's played really well this season. No doubt about it. But I think the front office, I'm sure, would like to see more minutes of those two together.
I think everybody wants to see that. Everybody has a right to want to see that because this man has been a top 2 rookie this year. No doubt about it. No one's going to say that he's number 3 or anything like that. I think he's surpassed expectations, but now we start to enter in that, okay, well, I want to see what this team could look like long-term. Him and Halliburton, you really got to work on that pairing because that's the pairing that you hope to have for 10 plus years, maybe even more in the NBA. So let's make sure it's perfect.
Yeah, and just real quick, I don't want to jump off my notes too much, but you also want to see how they fit together with Turner and see what other position you need to fill and what player would make more sense stylistically for those 3. And that's what you got to pay attention to in the draft, because if there's a guy in the draft that might fit well with Turner and Halliburton, but not Mathurin, do you take him? Or is there a guy that can fit well with all 3 of them? I mean, that's kind of my taking on that. But let's move on. Question number 2 comes from Gage. He said, who do you guys think the Pacers should target this offseason, whether it be draft, free agency, or the trade? So I did one for each, Facci, but I'll let you decide how you did this.
Okay. When it came to free agency, one name, I know you've liked this guy. I'll kick this name around for a little bit. Harrison Barnes is available. Look, he's an older guy. I don't know what he'd be asking for, but he could hold down that small forward spot, and I'm not sure what he could be looking for in terms of a contract, but I think your best bet is always going to be through the draft and trade. I think that's always going to be how the Pacers are, or maybe not always. I hope that's not always the case, but that's going to be the Pacers' best avenue to get better this offseason. Do they revisit a trade for OG or John Collins where the asking price could have come down? Could very well happen. As it relates to targeting, some players that we mentioned before, Jarace Walker from Houston, that's who I'm now like locked in on a power forward. That's what I want. And that guy, he's at the top of my list.
He kind of feels like my Tari Eason of this season. So,
well,
I've been pretty hyped on Walker for a while now, but there's other names that I'm very intrigued by too, Fudge. But yeah, I just basically for the draft a starting level wing. So, I think that's where I'm looking at the beginning. I think also a veteran college 4-man could be intriguing as well later in the draft because they do have that second round pick. And a name that I'm going to throw out there, Facci, just because I think that he's going to get love here in Indiana because he's from Indiana. That's Trace Jackson Davis.
I can see you saying that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to throw this out here. The guy blocks shots like crazy. He's quick off his feet, getting to the basket. He's a good rebounder. Does not have a great 3-point shot, but he's a good defender. And I feel like, I think he had like 5 blocks and 3 steals the other night, like just insane numbers. Like I'm just watching him play. I'm just like, this guy, he's really good. And I understand the concerns. He's older and stuff like that, but I feel like this is a guy that Carlisle could plug in almost like a better version of Terry Taylor in a sense. No 3-point shot, but a guy that, had to be the guy on his team, good rebounder, probably not as skilled of a rebounder as Terry was, but I just feel like there's things he can do. And if he can develop a 3-point shot, that'd be huge. And I'm not saying he's a guy that I'm like worried about is getting or not. I just think somebody like that, there's veterans in college that we've seen the Pacers go after before, like an Andrew Nembhard. So keep your eyes on something like that to get a ready now player. Free agency, 2 names I brought up before, Jalen McDaniels. I'm going to bring him up until I'm blue in the face or he's re-signed somewhere else. And then a restricted free agent, Cameron Johnson. And then lastly, for a trade, we're going to stick with that same team that Cameron Johnson's on right now, the Brooklyn Nets. See what's available, but maybe you call about Dorian Finney-Smith.
Apparently, I don't know if you heard this. I heard they had like an offer for 2 first-round picks.
Yeah,
Finney-Smith on the table. They didn't take that. I mean, wow, that was interesting.
Yeah, and there's always stuff that gets leaked out there, and like how good were those picks? Who were those picks from? Was it 2 bad Knicks picks? Was it 2 bad Pacers picks that they were given, like the Cavs and the Celtics? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So obviously Bridges was off. I think the Grizzlies were a team that offered 4 first-round picks for him, and they said no because look, those picks are going to be 25 or later in the next to 8 years. So that's a smart trade not to do that. So I think if you get Bridges, obviously, I mean, a slam dunk, Bridges over OG, but I think maybe more realistic, Dorian Finney-Smith, if the Nets are looking to get some more draft capital.
Now, that would be interesting. And to your point on Trace Jackson-Davis, is looking at, he's got a birthday in 2 days. I mean, there's birthdays going around left and right. He'll be 23 years old.
Yeah.
So definitely more of a veteran type player, but as what could be a second round pick, I mean, that could definitely be a guy that
or the Boston pick at 30. I think you got to look at it this way. Chris Duarte was drafted 2 years ago by the Pacers, 24 years old. Andrew Nembhard last year, what was he, 21, 22?
Yeah, he was.
So
Duarte, I mean, you know,
they don't care if you're a veteran player. If you can play basketball, I think they're interested. I'm not saying it's just him, but you know, like somebody like Drew Timme, as crazy as that sounds, I don't want Drew Timme. But I'm just saying,
I gotta stay far away. I know he's a great college player,
but he's got the chemistry. They run the same offense in Gonzaga that Andrew Nembhard was used to running. So you add Timme as like a third backup, you know, that kind of player. I mean, I'm not saying I want Timme. I'm just saying a lot of experience in college. It doesn't shock me if Carlisle tries to convince him on those.
The last one I'll say, and if we're going on the experience route, is Jalen Wilson out of Kansas. Small, okay. He's a wing. He's a senior, 6'7". I mean, 17 points, 8 rebounds. I mean, there's you know, he's been a good player, but he's definitely a little bit of an older player. So he's 22 and a half right now. So
oh my God, he's so old, Facci.
I know. Look, 22, you're by all means pretty much a child, but in the NBA, it's like, oh, I don't know.
I think the age thing is so over dramatic.
I definitely felt that way until the regression of Chris Duarte this year, and now I'm a little bit shook.
You don't draft someone at 24 years old, Facci, and expect anything less than a regression a little bit. But I'm talking, if you're looking at a guy that's 20 versus 22, what's the big difference?
Yes,
I mean,
I agree. You're either 18 or you're 23. I mean, it's like that big of a difference. When you're talking about he's 20 compared to 22, that's not that big of a difference. But I think at this point, if the Pacers actually are to use 4 picks in the top 32, they're not all going to be 18 or 19-year-olds.
No,
we'll tell you that. Otherwise, they won't be able to play.
That's exactly what they did this last draft. They took Benedict Mathurin, the stud, the star that's got a lot of potential. They took a veteran college player, and Andrew Nembhard, and they took a swing on a guy that's very raw, and Kendall Brown. I think you can kind of see the same model heading into this draft. But we're getting off topic here, Facci. Let's move on to the next question.
All right. Next question, we have Petey. Oh, actually.
No, Logan.
He said, who do you want the Pacers to draft? So we're seeing we're going draft heavy on these. Alex, you got another prospect up your sleeve?
Yeah, this is going to be a really shocking one here, but Victor Wembanyama is who I want the Pacers to draft, man. That's who I want to see them draft. I mean, you didn't say where we picking at. That is who I want them to draft. The number 1 player in this draft, the guy that could literally change a franchise. Give me Wemby.
Yeah, I mean, look, that as awesome as that would be, and I'm on boat with that. Brandon Miller to me is that guy that like we're just going to be just outside the reach of, and it hurts because I could see him going 3 or 4 and us picking 5th, and all of a sudden
could trade up,
and now we finally do have the assets to be able to make a trade like that. So I would be very interested in Brandon Miller if it works out.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, he feels like someone that could be gettable because he might not go 3, he might go 4, he might go 5. Mm-hmm. He could go 5. I'm just saying.
That's what I'm saying. Like he could go 5. We could be picking 5.
Yeah.
You never know. Last year we were slated to pick 5th, moved back. Maybe this year we move up if we're still in the 6th spot.
Absolutely. So let's go now to Petey. He said, which players will you be watching in this March Madness that you think the Pacers will have their eye on for the draft?
So I wanted to factor in if the team's record was not good, you weren't going to make March Madness, I wasn't factoring you in. And if you were in the G League, I was not factoring you in. One player, Noah Clowney, power forward out of Alabama. He's a 6'10" freshman, walking double-double. I think that he's going to be there towards the back end of the first round, where the Pacers do have a lot of picks. Also, one guy that who knows where he'll end up finishing, Bryce Sensabaugh, regarded as the 3rd best small forward in this draft out of Ohio State.
Yeah.
We'll see, averaging 16.5 points, 5 rebounds, shooting 43% from 3. He could go with the teens. Maybe the Pacers move up. Maybe he falls back. I really don't know, but that's someone that I have my eye on as a position of need.
Yeah, and this is someone I think the Pacers will be watching too. I think Grady Dick from Kansas is a big name to watch. He is
What are your thoughts on him?
he is a net torture, Facci. This guy can light it up from outside, and I think the Pacers love them some shooting. If they move on from Chris Duarte, they get the replacement in Grady Dick. I think that he's someone they could probably get in the later lottery if they moved up for him. He's not someone I'm taking at like 5 or 6, but I believe in his game. He's a freshman. I think he's a special player. Another name, Keontae George with Baylor. He's definitely someone that's had some really bright spots. Another guard. Do the Pacers need a guard? Probably not, but I think you got to keep your eye on him just to see what he does and see how special of a player he is. Chris Murray from Iowa. I think the Pacers had a lot of interest in Keegan Murray. You could get his replica in Chris Murray. Walker and Miller, 2 guys we've been talking about all mailbag long. And then one guy I just brought up, Trace Jackson Davis. I think they're going to keep an eye on him, but don't sleep on his teammate, Jalen Hood-Schifino. I've seen Sam Vecini moved him up into the lottery for him on his mock draft at number 14 because while Hood-Schifino is a point guard, he's 6'6", and his defense has really improved this freshman season. So not only is he a timely basket getter, he's improved defensively as well. Don't be surprised if the Pacers love them some Jalen Hood-Schifino.
So I'm looking on Tankathon, and they had Jalen at pick 28.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a big difference right over there. So I didn't know if maybe
Tankathon to me is not the place to look for your draft stuff. Now it's fun to look at it just to see what they say for mock draft stuff, but I love the in-depth analysis of the guys over at No Dunks. They do a great job. I think Sam Vecini, Kevin O'Connor, those kind of guys. A lot of people have been talking about Hood-Schifino and how he's rising up the board just because he's improving so well. And right now Indiana is, I think, the number 1 4 seed when you're looking at the NCAA and where they have everybody slotted at projection-wise right now. So that's the only reason I did the same thing as you. I had to cut off some teams that, I don't think they'll be watching because I don't think they're making the tournament.
Mm-hmm. So as it relates to Grady Dick, now here's the thing. Given I'm a big West Virginia University, fan.
So you hate
alumni,
Kansas.
Hate Kansas. Hate them with a passion. I've watched a lot of Kansas this year. I struggle with getting past the Grady Dick. He looks like the typical white boy, like he does. And it's just, look, I know this man can play, and I know he was a top recruit, but there's part of me that's like, can this guy translate on the next level? Is he just a really good shooter? I don't know. But Kansas had a few of those guys, even in this past draft, that really haven't done anything at all, like in the NBA this year. I'm going to have to look up in specific, not
Agbaji.
Not Agbaji. I mean, Hugh hasn't really done much, and he was National Player of the Year last year. But there was also one other guy that went to the draft that I'll find his name.
Christian Brown, playing for the Denver Nuggets. And that's why they traded away Bones Highland to get him some more playing time. White boy can jump, man. Don't be discriminating because of skin color now.
No, hey, look, I'm a white boy myself, man.
I know. I get it.
Yeah.
It's the same reason that we didn't want it's the same reason we didn't want what's his face from Gonzaga, Corey Kispert, a couple of years ago. We were low on Franz Wagner as well.
And that I will own that because I was wrong on that.
I think a lot of it was Franz is a different player than who he was in Michigan, though. Totally different.
Definitely, totally. I did not see this coming. That man is a beast.
Yeah.
So I'll gladly eat my words if Grady Dick ends up being a stud in the NBA. But I'm a little bit hesitant.
Yeah, I think Grady Dick could have like a Kyle Korver type of career.
I mean, that'd be awesome. Hey,
better than Luke Kennard, I think.
Yeah. Korver was like one of the premier 3-point shooters when we were growing up. So
I mean, that's what I think. I could see Grady Dick being like a lights out shooter. Now the defense he's gonna have to get better on. There's no doubt about that. But I think team defense wise, he'll be okay. I just feel like he's a smart basketball player. I'm intrigued by Grady Dick, Facci. I'll just put it that way. Let's move on to our next question. DJ Davis, you're up.
Yep. So DJ says, why not try Jalen Smith? Why not give him another chance at the power forward spot, or even give Isaiah Jackson a try at the 4? See what options your roster has for the next year.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I couldn't agree more, DJ. It's just like let Ijax get some run with Miles. I want to see what those two look like together. I think that could be an intriguing thing because if Ijax is able to guard guys on the perimeter, he doesn't have to worry about blocking the shots. So he can just play straight up defense. Miles back there to funnel it all. Let's see what that can do. I mean, same thing with Jalen. Just get him some playing time, whether it's at the 4 or the 5. We just need to see that man out there, see if he has anything left in the tank, see what he can do for this Pacers team moving forward, because there's talent there for sure. It's just, I think roster construction wise and how things have been played out, he didn't really get the best opportunity to showcase what he can do.
Yeah, I'm with you. Look, play Jalen Smith anywhere. You could even play him. Just you can't have him riding the bench after we saw last year that he can absolutely play. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just, we've barely seen anything this year. It's just not enough, especially the last few months. Isaiah Jackson, I just want to get him minutes anywhere you can, because I feel like that's the type of player that like could be a solid piece of this future. But a lot of it is going to come down to opportunity. And I fear, and I don't want to be the one watching the press conference saying, well, you know what, it might have come down to opportunity, and I don't think we gave Isaiah enough opportunity. And that's what we did with Goga. And it's just like, I don't want to go down that route again. Both guys, Isaiah Jackson's 21 years old. Jalen Smith, he's 22. These guys, I mean, we're talking about drafting players older than these guys. Like, we can't give up on them yet. So it's just like, give him some playing time. I'm all for it, DJ.
Yeah, for sure. So let's move on. Mike said, does Mathurin remind you of Russell Westbrook?
I actually kind of think that's a decent point. Now, here's the thing. They both have that alpha type mentality. But before anyone is like, what? Westbrook? Let's remember who Westbrook used to be, a former MVP.
Well, let's just put it this way. Westbrook gets unnecessary slander.
You definitely.
Left and right. Westbrook is got his flaws. Let's be honest.
Yes.
I'm not a Russell Westbrook defender right here.
No.
But everybody, when he signed with the Clippers, all you saw was, oh, that franchise is run. Their playoff dreams just went down the tank. It's like, can you guys just like step back and realize like the LA media on him with LeBron, they scapegoated him so bad.
Big time.
It was a horrible trade because they traded away all their shooting and everything. That wasn't, Westbrook's fault that he had no guys to throw to the shoot, but it's a bad trade. That's what Rob Pelinka has done. Besides this last trade deadline, most of his trades have been absolute terrible. So I will just say this, Russell Westbrook, glorified triple-double, Mr. Stat Grabber, whatever you want to call him, he's not as bad as people make him out to be. That's all I want to say.
No, he's not. Look, you're right. LA definitely used him as a scapegoat. But here's the thing. There's a big difference between Russell Westbrook making $48 million a year and Russell Westbrook being on a very affordable contract. So,
very fair.
Of actual Russ the player, I mean, this guy's got, could be a Hall of Famer. Borderline, whatever. That's a whole debate for another day. But a former MVP, a scoring title guy, a guy who, set the world on fire from a triple-double standpoint and everything in between. The mentalities is what I'm saying is like, okay, those are like dogs of like, hey, look, I'm going to go out there. I don't care who's guarding me. I'm going right through them. So I like that comparison. And there was a point in time where we would have loved for any player on our team to be compared to Russell Westbrook. I know times have changed in 2023, but I don't think that you could say that that's an awful comparison at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good observation. I think maybe you could say a little bit that he reminds me of him. Russ, to me, is much more explosive and athletic than Mathurin is. There's no doubt about it.
Better passer, rebounder.
Yes, better passer, better rebounder. I think Mathurin's probably a better shooter.
Yes, I would say so.
But he's been struggling. He's been struggling from distance, so it's kind of tough. Both are super confident, but you're talking about a guy that won the MVP. And Mathurin has a long ways to go before he's there. So I said, not really. I don't think they're the same player, but I see your point in terms of just like the points you mentioned, Facci. So not a terrible observation at all. I think it's a good observation because they're fearless, but their games are a little bit different.
They're definitely different. If I had to bet who's going to be the more accurate shooter in their career, I'm going Mathurin.
Yeah, for sure. He's going to get better.
Yep. Next question we have, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I believe it's Haomin Zhang said, what do you think the Pacers will end up doing with all of their 2023 draft picks?
Yeah, I think they keep their top 10 pick for sure, and they use the other 3 to move back into the lottery or that 12 to 20 range. I think they're gonna really pile those assets together to get back up. I think they're gonna target a player or 2 that they really like in the lottery. They wanted to trade back into the lottery last year, weren't able to do it, but I think if you can get 2 more lottery level picks on this team, Facci, or 2 top 15 picks in this year's draft, you're gonna probably feel pretty good about yourself. So that to me is what I think they're gonna do.
Yeah, I mean, 4 picks at the top 32, it's just way too much for any team. And I'm not at the point where I want to like draft a guy and stash him in Europe or anything. No. Consolidate those picks to move up or take those picks and some of our young players that are out of the rotation and make a trade for a more established player. But I really, if you're going to have, say, 4 picks this draft, I want to walk away with only 2 of them actually being on the roster, because there is just not enough spots on this team for 4 rookies to come in.
Yeah, for sure. Shalimar the God, his question said, how soon could the Pacers become the best example of how to rebuild in the NBA?
I mean, look, the best example, that sounds unbelievable. But, look, let's just go through what a few of those best examples were. I mean, the OKC Thunder had, they picked Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and then James Harden. Those are top 3 picks. Then eventually they made the finals. The Grizzlies went from awful to drafting John Morant and then soon being a contender in the West.
Jaren Jackson Jr.
Jaren Jackson Jr. was another top 5 pick. He was 4th overall. And then you look at the Suns. The Suns went from like a joke to all of a sudden you had Devin Booker. Then you drafted DeAndre Ayton 1st overall. You add Chris Paul, and then you're taking off. So bottom line is you need a star there. Whether you draft a star, you trade a star, or you sign a star, he's got to be there. We have our star in Tyrese Halliburton. We have a star in the making in Benedict Mathurin, but we need to add to that. And I think the big part of that is going to be picking like top 6. If you start to creep around 9, 10, you're getting like a pretty good rotation player, maybe someone a little bit better, but less proven. Top 6 is where you could really find your next stud. So it would be pretty detrimental if the Pacers were to go on a run and fall and pick around 10 or later.
Yeah, if you're picking outside of the top 6, you're kind of like becoming like the Washington Wizards. I mean, honestly, they're a team that like always right there, bottom of the playoff, barely making the playoffs or barely missing it. And that's not what you want to be. Like, they had some nice moments there by getting Wall and Bradley Beal, pretty close together.
Top 3 picks right there. That's what it takes.
And that's what changed your franchise, and now they're kind of like treading water, trying to stay relevant, So I just said, I'm not really sure, to be honest, though, when the Pacers will ever be that team. I said they've gotten pretty lucky on some trades. One thing Indiana has done is they've never really swung for home runs, Facci, with their trades. But by being consistent with their trades, they've turned home runs into 3 to 4 doubles, and it's getting you the same amount of points. It's just coming in different ways without giving all your assets up, because the big thing is you can't mortgage your future as a small market like the Lakers can going after Anthony Davis, or like Cleveland did going after Donovan Mitchell. Now, I think Cleveland's a good example because they drafted Evan Mobley, they drafted Darius Garland, they drafted Colin Sexton. They were able to sneak in as a 3rd team in that, or really a 4th team with that Rockets Nets trade with James Harden to get Jared Allen. They had Kevin Love. They had some other veterans on their roster that they were able to, figure out ways to move them around. But, even Isaac Okoro, he's a starter for them. They drafted a lot of their talent, but by drafting for 3 to 4 years in a row, getting their guy solidified and having a good chance, they were able to then trade their future picks. They didn't mortgage everything until they were in that right spot. So I think Indiana has that ability moving forward, but they just haven't been one team to go all in, make the Kevin Durant trade, make the Donovan Mitchell trade. They've traded Paul George, and they got back Oladipo and Sabonis with no picks. Everybody laughed at him. They turned Sabonis into Tyrese Halliburton, Buddy Hield, and Tristan Thompson. So they ended up turning Victor Oladipo into Karis LeVert, who turned into Ricky Rubio and 2 picks, and now you're talking Andrew Nembhard on this team, and whoever they get this year in the draft. If they use that to trade up, you're talking they've really done a good job of liquidating their picks and their players and making the right moves. So to me, that's kind of a model that could be somewhat followable. However you say that word, you could follow that model pretty well. But I think it only works for small markets. I don't think it's an NBA thing.
No, exactly. Look, not every team gets the opportunity to pull off like what the Brooklyn Nets did. Oh my God, they signed Kevin Durant, they signed Kyrie Irving, they traded for James Harden. It's like left and right, they were making all these splashes. For the Pacers, you get one of those, opportunities every so often. I mean, that could be years. And I think finally we're getting to that point where it feels more realistic. In the past, what assets were you going to trade to bring in a real star and also remain competitive? Now the Pacers are starting to get there. So that's what has me really excited. But for the last question we have, it's Evan Nogales. He said, how secure is Carlisle's job? What needs to happen to see him as the Pacers coach 3 to 5 years from now?
I think he's 100% safe, Facci. Ownership trusts him, the front office trusts him, and the important players on the team have openly praised his coaching style. I think he's the coach until he doesn't want to be. There's no doubt in my mind that Carlisle, if he wants to retire with the Pacers as the coach, he can retire. If he wants to move into the front office, maybe as a part of the front office, like general manager's side of things or a consultant, I think that's kind of it. There's a reason he came back to Indiana, in my opinion, and I think that's to finish out his career here.
It's a great point. Look, this is his third stint with the Pacers, so he feels as secure as could possibly be. I think if the Pacers, properly develop young talent, get Halliburton to sign a long-term deal where he's also happy, and then they're also competing in the playoffs year in, year out. It's Rick's job until he wants to step away. I think the only way that something like that could change would be if things go south, the relationship with Halliburton is broken, where maybe Halliburton wants out, and maybe like a president or GM gets fired and a new one comes in and then wants to put a stamp on the team. That's the only way I could see things changing. But in every scenario, I see Carlisle finishing out this contract. Definitely, like no changes at all in the remaining 2 years after this, and then the rest is up to Rick, unless things go absolutely down south.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard Bob Kravitz joke about Kevin Pritchard in the front office won't be here for those Lakers picks when that was all talked about. So, it's 2023, 2027, 2029. It's really not that far away. It's 4 to 5 years from now. If Pritchard decides, hey, I've been doing this for a while, I'd rather like to retire, kind of like Larry Bird did, and, retire at a young enough age with his wife and their young kids. Maybe that's something he looks forward to doing. I'm just speculating. I don't know. And then maybe Carlisle joins Chad Buchanan, Kelly Kroskoff in that front office, Ted Wu, just to be a part of that and find his successor, be a part of finding his successor in that thing. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but, eventually ownership's going to be shifted over to Stephen Simon. But I still think, Carlisle and Steve Simon have a great relationship. I know Carlisle's talked about him openly before, like with Steve Simon being at some of the games and stuff like that. So, it's going to be an awesome thing to see when it happens, but, give Carlisle a chance to prove himself in the playoffs, because I think that's where he's going to be most valuable, is in the playoff series, how he's able to tinker with things. He's just such a mastermind offensively. I think he's going to be really good. But Facci, anything else before we close out?
No, just say that the mail has been delivered. It's been read, and we appreciate everybody who sent in questions. Thank you very much for making Mailbag what it is.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Tell people where they can find us at then on social media.
Absolutely. So you can find us on Twitter at @SettingThePace3. You can find Alex on Twitter at AlexGoldenNBA. I can be found on Twitter at _FACCI. You can find us on Instagram at Pacers Talk. You can find us on Facebook at Setting the Pace. You can find us on TikTok at Setting the Pace. And Alex, tell them where they can check us out on YouTube.
Yeah, go to youtube.com/Setting the Pace, a Pacers podcast, where you can find all of our content. This Mailbag episode will be available on there. So if you're looking at me saying this, hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think of our questions and our answers. And if you have different answers, please leave those in the comment section below. But we want to thank you all so much for being a part of our YouTube family. Thank you very much. Facci, we got to get things wrapped up here. So I got to hit you with this. Are you excited to see Benedict Mathurin back in action for the Pacers when they return from AllStar break? Hit me with those 3 words.
Let's go, Pacers!
Setting the pace, going to the top. Setting the pace, going to the top. This is your #1 podcast. Sweeping every team. We gon' need a mop. Smooth.
Baby.